Hey everyone! Ready to dive deep into the world of The House of Us? Released on the 29th of August, 2018, this film didn't just make waves, it created a tidal shift in Filipino cinema. It swept through theaters like a storm of emotions, drawing in massive crowds, smashing records, and touching hearts in a way few local films have ever done. And here's the thing, it didn't rely on fantasy, high-octane action, or wild plot twists to earn its spotlight. It leaned into something far more real, love, and everything that comes with it. The messy, raw, soul-crushing yet beautiful kind of love that most people have either experienced or dreamed of. And that's exactly what makes The House of Us so extraordinary. It captures the ordinary and reveals its brilliance. At the heart of this cinematic gem are George and Primo, two characters who could easily be your neighbors, your classmates, your best friends, or even yourself. George, played with heartfelt depth and nuance by Kathryn Bernardo, is a woman of ambition, resilience, and inner fire. She's studying to become a doctor, not just for the title or prestige, but to secure a future she believes in. Primo, portrayed by the ever-charismatic Padilla, is her polar opposite in temperament. An idealistic, passionate, sometimes reckless musician, riding the waves of his own dreams while struggling to find his place in a world that demands practicality. Together, they are magic. They are chaos. They are what happens when love burns too brightly for too long without a safety net. The film wastes no time drawing us into their universe. We watch them in their early days, radiating hope and spontaneity. They inherit a house, a fixer-upper, a symbol of both promise and weight. It becomes their world, their sanctuary, their battleground. The house is more than just a setting. It breathes with them, ages with them, carries their laughter, their arguments, their silences. It creaks with the pressure of their dreams and heartbreaks. It's within those four walls that the film does something special. It slows down time and lets us live with them, not as outsiders looking in, but as silent companions feeling every rise and fall. But the movie doesn't just coast on romantic tropes. As George grinds her way through med school and Primo continues chasing music without a roadmap, the gap between them slowly stretches. George begins to feel alone in a relationship built on shared dreams that no longer feel mutual. Primo, overwhelmed by his own unfulfilled expectations, starts to implode under the weight of his potential. And that's when the story flips the switch. It stops being about falling in love and starts dissecting the anatomy of staying in love. It's a raw, unflinching look at how love evolves, gets tested, and sometimes gets lost. What makes The House of Us even more captivating is how it handles these emotional turns. There are no grand villains, no ultimate betrayals. Just life, harsh, relentless, and real. The conflict is internal, personal. You don't get the relief of pointing fingers. Instead, you find yourself reflecting. Have I been George? Have I been Primo? Would I have walked away? Would I have stayed? It's that self-reflective grip that hooks you. It's what pulls audiences back for second and third viewings, trying to decode the micro-expressions, the missed chances, the what-ifs that build over time. The performances? Let's talk about them. Kathryn Bernardo is a revelation here. She transforms George from a bubbly dreamer into a hardened realist, but never loses the character's vulnerability. Her eyes alone could narrate the story. You see every quiet heartbreak, every attempt to hold on, and finally, the strength to let go. Padilla, on the other hand, sheds his matinee idol skin and delivers a deeply human performance. Primo is frustrating, lovable, broken, and sincere all at once. Padilla doesn't play him for sympathy, he plays him for truth. That layered portrayal adds so much emotional weight to the film's pivotal moments, especially when Primo returns years later, older, maybe wiser, but still clinging to the love they once had. Visually, the movie never distracts with flashiness but instead leans into realism. The cinematography is intimate, often bathed in natural light or dimmed warmth that reflects the emotional tone of each scene. Rain pours not just to mark time, but to symbolize the emotional weather between them. Quiet moments linger, shots of George alone in bed, Primo composing in silence, the sound of footsteps echoing in the house that used to be a home. And the music? It's the pulse of the film. The soundtrack blends seamlessly into the narrative, offering comfort and nostalgia, especially in moments where words fail. Every note deepens the emotional layers, pulling viewers even deeper into the story. And now, the twist, not the usual plot twist that shocks, but the one that quietly hits home. When Primo returns after their separation, he doesn't come bearing promises or dramatic declarations. He comes with humility, with the willingness to listen, to face the hurt, to see George not as the girl who stayed by his side, but the woman who chose to grow without him. That reunion isn't painted with sweeping music and grand gestures. It's handled with restraint, with realism. And that's what makes it land even harder. You don't know if they'll make it work again. But for a moment, you believe in second chances. So why did The House of Us become a cultural phenomenon? Why did it hit so hard, not just at the box office, but in the hearts of millions? Because it spoke a truth so many avoid. That love isn't just about the highs, it's about surviving the lows. That relationships aren't always fairytale perfect. That two people can deeply love each other and still not be enough in certain chapters of their lives. And that sometimes, walking away isn't giving up. It's the bravest, most loving thing you can do. In a country where love stories are often wrapped in neat little bows, The House of Us dared to say, what if it's not that simple? It invited viewers to sit with discomfort, to wrestle with unresolved feelings, to understand that not all endings are definitive, and not all beginnings need to be loud. It resonated across generations, sparking debates about love and timing, ambition and sacrifice, self-worth and compromise. It didn't just entertain, it provoked. For every couple struggling to balance love and personal growth, for every dreamer unsure of where their passion will take them, for every person who's ever looked at someone and wondered if love alone could be enough, The House of Us offers a story that feels like a conversation you didn't know you needed to have. That's why it matters. That's why it endures. And that's why diving deep into its narrative, its characters, and its emotional truths isn't just worthwhile, it's essential. Because somewhere in those quiet moments and tender goodbyes, in the silence between words and the space between two people who once shared everything, The House of Us reminds us of what love really means. Not just the hows, but the whys. It all starts with a feeling, a spark so warm, so effortless, it pulls you in without resistance. George and Primo aren't just two people crossing paths. They're a force of nature when they come together. George Reyes, this bright, determined, and no-nonsense medical student, is laser-focused on her future. She's the type who sees life in checklists and schedules, who chases structure because she knows how fragile life can be. Then there's Primo Alvarez, unruly, artistic, a walking daydream with a guitar slung over his shoulder and a rhythm that only he seems to understand. They meet like fire meets oxygen, innocently at first, in the way young people do, when they still believe that love alone can weather anything. Their chemistry is electric, but it's the kind of connection that builds slowly, layering moment after moment. George is cautious. Primo is impulsive. But it works. Their differences aren't obstacles. They're magnets. They fill in each other's blanks. You feel it when they laugh, when they walk the streets together, when they steal moments between her exams and his gigs. It feels real because it is real. The kind of love that makes you forget the world outside for just a little while. Then comes the house, the inheritance from George's grandaunt. It's old, a little broken, but filled with history. It becomes their blank canvas. They move in, not as a couple with a plan, but as dreamers ready to build something from scratch. Every corner of the house feels like a metaphor, imperfect, full of potential, waiting for love and patience to breathe life into it again. They paint the walls, argue over tiles, sneak kisses in between chores. The honeymoon phase is in full bloom, and the house becomes more than just shelter. It becomes a symbol of everything they believe their future will be. But life doesn't care about your plans. Slowly, the cracks begin to show, not in the walls, but in them. Primo's career, the one he swore would take off, starts stalling. Gigs dry up. His confidence begins to erode. The music industry is brutal, and while Primo has talent, he lacks the direction, the strategy, the discipline. He's chasing inspiration, hoping lightning strikes, but in the meantime, Bills are piling up, and George is picking up the slack. George, buried in medical textbooks and hospital rounds, tries to be patient. She believes in Primo. She wants him to succeed. But she's also exhausted. She's fighting for a future they both said they wanted, yet she's carrying most of the weight alone. Her sacrifices start to feel lopsided. She misses sleep, skips meals, smiles less. And every time Primo fails to show up, literally or emotionally, it chips away at the version of him she fell in love with. The arguments start small. A forgotten errand. A missed appointment. But they escalate quickly. Words that can't be unsaid. Accusations that cut too deep. Primo accuses George of not understanding his passion. George accuses Primo of hiding behind dreams instead of growing up. The house, once filled with laughter, now echoes with silence and resentment. Even the music fades. But it's not all cold. There are still moments, quiet, desperate, tender moments, when they try to salvage what's left. George cooks his favorite meal. Primo writes her a song. They hold each other at night, pretending everything is fine, even though they both know it's not. There's love. So much love. But sometimes love isn't enough when everything else is crumbling. Then comes a pivotal moment. George gets a shot at something bigger, a breakthrough in her academic journey, something that could cement her future. She's ecstatic. She comes home ready to share the news, but Primo isn't there. Again. Instead, he's off playing music, lost in a world that keeps rejecting him. That absence, on that specific day, hurts more than any argument. Because it proves what George's heart has been whispering for a while now. She's no longer his priority. Primo returns to a cold room and a colder stare. George doesn't even yell this time. It's quiet. That still, deadly kind of quiet that's more painful than screaming. It's a moment of emotional reckoning. She asks him, genuinely, heartbreakingly, what he's still fighting for. Primo tries to answer, but it's clear even he doesn't know anymore. The house, their dreams, their relationship, it's all hanging by a thread, fraying fast. The breaking point isn't explosive. It's subtle. A look. A silence. A door that closes softly but feels like a scream. George walks away emotionally before she physically does. She starts packing pieces of her heart, bit by bit, preparing for an ending she never wanted. Primo senses it, tries to hold on, but it's slipping through his fingers. The harder he clings, the faster it breaks. And then it happens. Primo leaves. Maybe he thought it was temporary. Maybe he thought space would help. But he doesn't just walk out of the house. He walks out of her life. And George is left in the house they built, surrounded by memories she's no longer sure were ever real. Time skips. Seasons change. The once bright walls are now faded. George is still there, but she's different. Colder. Stronger. Focused. She finishes med school, wears her pain like armor, keeps her heart under lock and key. Life moved on, but a part of her is still waiting. Or maybe not waiting, just unfinished. Until one day, out of nowhere, Primo returns. He's older, different. Not dramatically so, but enough that you can tell life has humbled him. He's not the same wide-eyed dreamer. He carries the weight of absence, of regret, of someone who finally realized what he lost. And that's where the second half begins, not with a rekindling of romance, but with the heavy work of unpacking the past. But even before that, in the first half, the seeds are all there. The joy, the passion, the resentment, the emotional wear and tear that eventually leads to collapse. You feel it in every scene, in every pause between words, in every look exchanged across a dinner table. This is not just a story about love blooming. It's about the silent ways it withers, about how time, ambition, pride, and unspoken pain can slowly corrode even the strongest foundations. The House of Us doesn't rush to tell you where it's going. It simmers. It lets you feel the decay. The first half isn't filled with huge plot twists or dramatic reveals. It's packed with emotional precision. It lays the groundwork so quietly that by the time you realize how much has changed, it's too late. That's what makes it hit so hard. Because it's not one big moment that ends them. It's the slow, inevitable erosion of things left unsaid, needs unmet, dreams misaligned. And yet, despite all of it, there's something that lingers. A hope. A possibility. The first half ends with a sense of unfinished business. Not in a cliched, romantic cliffhanger kind of way, but in the very human sense that maybe, just maybe, these two people still have something to figure out. It's not about will they get back together. It's about will they heal. Will they face the damage they caused each other? Will they acknowledge the love that still exists beneath all the hurt? That's the suspense. That's the hook that keeps you watching. Because by now, you're not just watching a film. You're emotionally invested in their journey. You need to know, was it all for nothing? And just like that, he's back. The house is the same, yet different. Time has left its mark. Paint is fading. The walls feel heavier. The echoes of laughter and heartbreak still cling to the corners. George stands in the middle of it all, shocked, not by his face, but by the weight of everything he brings back with him. Primo has returned, but he's not trying to pick up where they left off. He's not here with roses or a guitar. He's here with a request. Practical. Quiet. He wants to fix the house. Legally, it's his too, after all. George doesn't know how to react. She says yes. Because what else can she say? The house needs repairs. She needs closure. But with every hammer strike and coat of paint, memories come flooding back. They're living under the same roof again. Not as lovers, not even as friends. Just two people trying to coexist in the ruins of something that used to be their entire world. Primo is different now. He's more patient, quieter. He listens more. There's a sadness in him, but also a calm. He doesn't try to win George back. He doesn't demand forgiveness. He just shows up, every day, working on the house, cooking meals, fixing what he once neglected. And maybe, in that stillness, George starts to feel again. Not love, not yet, but something close to understanding. They begin talking, not about them, not at first, but about the house, about the past, about everything and nothing. And in these moments, we learn more. Primo opens up about his failures. About how chasing music led him nowhere because he never truly committed. He talks about the heartbreak of losing George, of watching his dreams slip away while doing nothing to stop it. It's not an apology, not directly, but it's the most honest thing he's ever said. George, in turn, reveals her own wounds. The nights she spent crying alone. The exhaustion of carrying the relationship on her back. The loneliness of loving someone who didn't show up when it mattered. She's built walls now, taller than before. But Primo doesn't try to climb over them. He respects them. That, more than anything, begins to change things. As the house transforms, so do they. In one of the most intimate scenes, no kiss, no touch, just George and Primo sitting side by side, sipping coffee in silence. You can feel it. The shift. The possibility. The love is still there. It never left. But it's been buried under years of pain. And now, slowly, it's being unearthed. Then comes the twist. Primo isn't staying. He's been invited to join a music residency in Amsterdam. An opportunity he once would have let slip through his fingers. But not now. He's learned. He's grown. And he knows this time, he has to chase it the right way. George is stunned. She thought he'd stay. Maybe even hoped he would. But here he is, ready to leave again. But for the right reasons this time. Their roles have reversed. George, once the anchor, is now unsure. Primo, once lost, is finally found. And that's where the film delivers its emotional crescendo. They're not fighting anymore. They're feeling. George asks him, softly, desperately, why now? Why, after everything, is he only getting it right when they're no longer together? Primo's answer is simple. Because losing her taught him everything he never knew. And he doesn't ask her to wait. He doesn't ask for anything. He just wants her to know that he's finally ready, to be who she always believed he could be. There's no dramatic kiss. No rain-soaked confession. Just two people standing in the home they built together, realizing that sometimes love isn't about staying. Sometimes, It's about letting go so each person can become who they're meant to be. Primo leaves. And George? She stays. But she's no longer frozen in time. She's free. The weight has lifted. She finishes her residency, steps into her future with quiet confidence. The house, now fully repaired, stands as a monument not to their failed love, but to their growth. To everything they survived, learned, and overcame. But the story doesn't end there. Months pass. Life moves. And then, one final moment. Primo returns. Not with a grand entrance. Not to ask for anything. He just shows up at the house, guitar in hand. George is there. She opens the door. They smile. It's a smile layered with memory, possibility, forgiveness. We don't know what happens next. The film doesn't tell us. It doesn't have to. Because this story was never about whether or not they'd end up together. It was about the journey. About the growing pains of young love, the silence of heartbreak, the resilience of the human spirit. Everything connects, the early joy, the painful unraveling, the quiet rebuilding. The house is the metaphor, yes, but it's also the truth. You can patch up the walls, repaint the rooms, fix the roof, but it's the people inside who need to change for it to feel like home again. And in the end, that's what The House of Us gives us. Not a love story, but a story about love. In all its messy, painful, beautiful forms. The kind that breaks you. The kind that heals you. The kind that teaches you that sometimes, loving someone means letting them go, and trusting that if it's meant to be, they'll find their way back. George Reyes didn't fall in love by accident. She's the kind of person who measures every decision, every move. A medical student with a heart that beats just as strongly for her future as it does for the people she loves. George is grounded, disciplined, and fiercely loyal. But beneath the surface, there's a quiet fragility. A vulnerability born from wanting things to turn out right so badly that the idea of failure isn't just disappointing, it's terrifying. So when she loves Primo, she doesn't do it halfway. She dives in with the same conviction she uses to study human anatomy. Methodical, intense, all-consuming. George is a character who doesn't wear her heart on her sleeve. Kathryn Bernardo brings her to life with an honesty that doesn't need grand gestures. Every furrowed brow, every exhausted sigh, every smile that lingers just a second too long. These are the details that make George unforgettable. Her transformation isn't marked by big changes. It's the small shifts, how she stops waiting for texts that never come. How she begins to speak up, even when it hurts. How she learns that sometimes, choosing yourself is the hardest kind of love. Opposite her is Primo Alvarez, played by Daniel Padilla with equal parts charisma and chaos. Primo is a dreamer in the truest sense. He walks through life like it's a song waiting to be written. When we first meet him, he's magnetic, charming. He sees the world not through a lens of responsibility, but of possibility. And that's exactly what draws George to him. He gives her color in a world that often feels gray. With him, life isn't just about becoming a doctor. It's about dancing in the living room, singing off-key at midnight, believing in something bigger than the plan. But Primo's greatest strength is also his flaw. His passion, his refusal to conform, becomes his excuse. When his music career starts to flounder, he doesn't pivot. He doubles down. He tells himself that he's misunderstood, that the world just isn't ready. But in truth, he's scared. Scared to grow up. Scared to change. Daniel Padilla captures this tension brilliantly, not through loud breakdowns, but through quiet moments of defeat. The way Primo slouches in disappointment, how his voice trembles when he's trying to act like everything's fine, the way he avoids eye contact when the truth starts creeping in. These subtleties give Primo depth beyond the charming surface. Together, George and Primo are electric, but they're also a cautionary tale. Their relationship feels real because it mirrors the painful truths of growing up together. In the beginning, they're aligned, full of hope, ready to build a future in the house they inherited, dreaming of forever. But over time, their paths diverge. George starts sprinting toward a life that demands consistency and commitment, while Primo is stuck in the loop of chasing his ever-elusive moment of success. This divergence isn't sudden. It's a slow drift, painful, silent, and eventually inevitable. You can feel it in the way they stop meeting each other in the hallway, in the dinners that grow quieter, in the way George starts to speak more to herself than to Primo. And perhaps what hurts most is that neither of them becomes a villain. They're both trying, just not in sync. Their love doesn't die because it wasn't strong enough. It breaks because strength, alone, was never going to be enough without growth. One of the most remarkable things about The House of Us is how it doesn't idealize or romanticize these characters. Instead, it allows them to fail. It gives them space to be messy, immature, proud, stubborn. George lashes out. Primo avoids accountability. They both walk away when they should have stayed. But through these failures, they grow, not into perfect people, but into better versions of themselves. When Primo returns after their separation, it's not with apologies laced in manipulation or desperation. He's not trying to win her back with a song or a memory. He comes back as someone who's finally seen what it means to take responsibility for his life, for his choices, for the pain he caused. And George, now older and more guarded, doesn't immediately crumble. She listens. She watches. And she holds her ground. Their reconnect ion is not built on nostalgia. It's built on emotional maturity. On the realization that healing isn't about pretending the past didn't happen, but about acknowledging it fully, scars and all. What makes their dynamic so compelling is the unspoken language they develop throughout the film. The long silences that say more than words. The eye contact that lingers too long. The tiny shifts in body language that tell you everything before either of them speaks. Kathryn and Daniel don't perform the love. They live it on screen. You feel like you're watching two people who have history, who know each other's weaknesses, who have seen the best and worst, and who still, after all the damage, carry the remnants of that first spark. But the story isn't just about them. Surrounding George and Primo are characters who, while not always front and center, add layers of meaning to their journey. George's brother, for instance, represents the perspective of someone who watches from the sidelines, loving, supportive, and often helpless. He sees George struggle. He sees Primo stumble. And in his own quiet way, he becomes the emotional barometer of the film, reminding us that the people around a couple often carry silent heartbreaks of their own. Primo's family also plays a subtle but essential role in shaping who he is. There's a moment where we see how disconnected Primo has become from his roots. His pride, his insistence on doing everything on his own, isolates him not just from George, but from the people who once held him up. When he begins to reconnect, it's not played as a grand homecoming. It's understated, but it shows how far he's come, from a boy lost in dreams to a man willing to build bridges. And of course, there's the house. It's almost a character on its own, a witness to every fight, every kiss, every moment of silence. As the film progresses, the house physically transforms alongside George and Primo. It begins in disrepair, full of hope and dust, then becomes cluttered with tension and unfinished dreams, and finally, in the end, it stands proud and strong again, renovated, restored, and quietly dignified. Just like them. This thematic mirroring is what makes the characters in The House of Us so unforgettable. Every piece of the story is connected. George's ambition isn't just about becoming a doctor. It's about proving she can choose herself without guilt. Primo's dream isn't just about music. It's about finding a voice, a purpose, and the strength to be someone worthy of love, not just admiration. And their journey together is not linear. It loops, spirals, stutters. It reflects the chaos of real relationships, the kind where timing is wrong, where emotions get in the way, where love is never the problem, but always the question. By the end of the film, there's no clear resolution. We're not told if George and Primo end up together forever. There's just a look, a moment, a possibility, and that's all it needs. Because the transformation of these characters is already complete. Whether they reunite romantically or simply continue on as people who once loved each other deeply, their arcs have landed exactly where they needed to. George, now a doctor, no longer defines her happiness by someone else's potential. Primo, now a musician with direction, no longer defines his worth by who stays or leaves. And that, ultimately, is the beauty of The House of Us. It's a story not just about two people falling in love, but about two people growing into themselves, even if it means growing apart. In the end, the film doesn't beg for a fairy tale. It dares to show what happens after the magic fades, when reality sets in, and when love is tested by life itself. And it trusts the audience to understand that sometimes, the most powerful love stories don't end in happily ever after. Sometimes, they end in growth, in clarity, in healing. And those stories, the ones rooted in truth rather than fantasy, are the ones that stay with you. It starts with the house. The one they inherit. The one with the fading yellow walls, cracked tiles, and overgrown vines curling up the sides like time refusing to let go. It's not just a backdrop. It's a living, breathing witness to everything George and Primo go through. What most viewers might not immediately notice is that the house subtly transforms in tandem with their relationship. Every chipped wall, every broken fixture, a mirror to their unraveling. And later, every nail hammered in, every repaired light bulb, becomes a quiet declaration of hope. But even more quietly, the house holds memories, not just theirs, but of the people who lived before them. Photos are left undisturbed. A record player sits still in the corner. This is where the past lingers, whispering reminders that some stories are cyclical. That love, if not nurtured, erodes just like stone and wood. And that motif, of time as both destroyer and healer, echoes throughout the film, not just in the structure of the house, but in its visual language. Notice the way clocks appear repeatedly. In George's study room. On the kitchen wall. In the reflection behind Primo during a particularly tense scene. It's not accidental. Time is always watching, always ticking down. The film quietly asks, how much time does it take before we forget how to love? And later, how long does it take to forgive? There's a moment, early in the film, that seems almost throwaway. George and Primo play a silly game while painting a wall. They challenge each other to say 3 things they love about the house. George says, the light in the morning, with a smile. Primo says, the echo when we sing. It's sweet, simple. But later in the film, after the silence, the anger, the separation, George stands in that same room alone. The morning light hits her face. And she smiles again, not because she remembers what he said, but because part of her still does, even if she won't admit it. That's the beauty of how The House of Us handles callbacks. They aren't loud. They're folded gently into the narrative, like memories we didn't know we were carrying until they return in a quiet moment. The soundtrack, too, is layered with meaning. Listen closely to the musical choices. The score swells during moments of connection but falls nearly silent during conflict, not just to highlight the tension, but to reflect how relationships often fail not in shouts, but in silence. There's a particularly clever touch when Primo plays an original song for George, a piece he claims he's been working on for a while. The lyrics, at first pass, feel like standard romantic longing. But later, in the second half of the film, those same lyrics take on new weight when he plays them again. This time slower, more somber, with pauses where once there was flow. What changes isn't the music, it's the context. The melody becomes a ghost of what was lost, a mirror of regret. And that's the thread that The House of Us quietly weaves throughout. Nothing in love changes as much as the way we look at the things we once cherished. Even the clothing choices are deliberate. George begins the film in light, soft tones, blues, creams, pastels, colors of clarity and hope. But as their relationship falters, so does her palette. Grays, deep maroons, darker hues take over. And then, when she reclaims herself, when she finds her way back to strength, the colors return, not as bright, but steadier. Mature. It's subtle costume storytelling, something sharp-eyed viewers might notice in rewatch, but it underscores just how visually intentional this film is. And then there's Primo. Early on, he's in loose clothes, half-tucked shirts, and jackets that don't quite fit, like he's still playing at adulthood, not wearing it. But when he returns years later, there's a shift. His outfits are more structured. He still looks like Primo, but now, he fits the frame. And that detail speaks volumes. He hasn't just changed externally. He's become someone who doesn't run from responsibility anymore. He's no longer just an artist. He's a man who finally understands what it means to build, not just dream. Symbolism is layered throughout the setting, but also in repeated objects. Take the teacup that George drops in the kitchen during a fight, cracked but not shattered. It's easy to miss, but that same cup appears again, later, glued back together and quietly sitting in a corner cabinet. It's not front and center. The camera doesn't linger, but it's there, restored, imperfect, and cherished. A metaphor for their relationship, yes, but also for George herself. Bruised, but never broken. And perhaps one of the most powerful symbols is the doorframe. Early in the film, they mark their heights on it with a pencil. Laughing, joking, making promises about the future. It's playful and innocent. But when Primo leaves, George stares at that doorframe. The pencil lines remain, but everything else has changed. And when he returns, there's a moment, fleeting but deeply poetic, where he passes it, runs his fingers over the old markings. He doesn't say anything, but in that simple act, he remembers who they were. And we, the audience, remember too. It's nostalgia without sentimentality, memory without indulgence. The dialogue, too, carries hidden meanings. Primo often says, "Sidelang," a casual phrase meaning just go on. But when he says it to George, it's layered with so much more. It's a quiet permission, a surrender, a resignation. It shows up in multiple forms throughout the film. In the early days, it's encouragement. Later, it becomes avoidance. And finally, at the moment of their parting, it becomes a blessing. A way of saying, even if I'm not part of what comes next, I want you to keep going. It's 3 syllables that grow in meaning with every usage. There's also a cultural thread that runs deep beneath the surface, especially for Filipino viewers. The house inheritance, the weight of staying versus leaving, the intergenerational tension between choosing passion over practicality. These are not just personal struggles. They're rooted in Filipino identity. In a culture where sacrifice is often seen as love, and leaving is both a dream and a betrayal, George and Primo's journey echoes the lives of thousands who've had to choose between love and legacy, between duty and desire. One brilliant Easter egg sits in a family photo tucked on a shelf, barely in frame. It shows George and her brother, younger, with their parents. It's not referenced directly, but it provides silent context. The house, as it turns out, was once filled with more than just romantic dreams. It was a family home. And in the spaces George and Primo now inhabit, generations of expectations echo. Their failure feels heavier because it's not just about them. It's about everyone who believed they could make it work. Another quiet nod comes during a hospital scene. A nurse walks past with a name tag that reads Reyes. Not George, someone else. Just a brief flash. But it's a subtle reminder that George's world is full of people like her. Strong, tired, carrying burdens with grace. It's a nod to the invisible support systems that surround us, even when we feel alone. And a quiet thank you to the profession George fights so hard to become part of. The film also plays with mirrors, literally. Watch how many scenes involve reflections. George brushing her teeth while Primo watches from behind. Primo alone in the mirror after an argument. Their final conversation shot with both of them reflected in glass. Mirrors become a visual metaphor for self-confrontation. They force the characters, and us, to face what we've become. What we've lost. What we still carry. One of the most poetic visual choices appears in the scene where George finally breaks down, standing in the rain, after yet another emotional blow. It's cliché, at first glance. But here's the trick. The rain doesn't cleanse her. It doesn't offer redemption. It just makes her cold. And that's the point. Growth doesn't always come with relief. Sometimes it comes with numbness. With the realization that you've hit rock bottom. And only then, quietly, can rebuilding begin. There are other tiny moments, so easy to miss. Primo wearing the same shirt in the breakup scene as he did during their first day in the house. The books on George's shelves shifting from love stories to medical texts. The plant by the window slowly withering, and then later, regrowing. These aren't just aesthetic choices. They're storytelling breadcrumbs, placed lovingly by filmmakers who understand that the soul of a film lives in the details. Even the film's title, The House of Us, is itself a question, not a statement. It doesn't ask if they love each other. It asks how. How do we stay when staying hurts? How do we grow when the person beside us is changing too? How do we let go with love? How do we forgive without forgetting? The final scene, where Primo returns with no expectations, no promises, is not an answer. It's another how. A moment open to interpretation. And if you look closely at Georgia's reaction, the flicker in her eyes, the pause before her smile, you realize that this isn't the end of a love story. It's the beginning of understanding. Because that's what The House of Us leaves you with, not certainty, but curiosity. A desire to go back, rewatch, and catch everything you missed. Every gesture, every line, every hidden heartache nestled in the corners of the frame. It's a film that rewards attention, that reveals itself more and more with each viewing. Like love itself, it's something you don't fully understand until you've lived with it. And then, suddenly, it hits you. It was all there. In the silence. In the rain. In the glue holding a broken cup together. In the pencil marks on the doorframe. In the way they looked at each other, and then, didn't. In all the house. Before the cameras even rolled, The House of Us was already a gamble. The concept was pitched during a particularly saturated year in Filipino cinema, when romantic dramas were struggling to rise above formula. Yet director Cathy Garcia-Molina wasn't interested in another fairy tale. She wanted realism. Complexity. A love story that didn't just begin with butterflies, but dealt with what happens when they're gone. And that intention sparked the first big challenge. The script was constantly evolving. It wasn't a static document but a living, breathing manuscript, rewritten even during filming. Kathryn Bernardo and Daniel Padilla, both industry darlings with massive followings, were handed scenes just hours before shooting. Sometimes, moments were improvised. The goal? Capture raw emotion. Keep things unpredictable. Which sounds exciting, until you realize that meant navigating emotionally heavy material without the safety net of rehearsed lines. And speaking of emotionally heavy, Kathryn Bernardo went through real physical exhaustion during production. The hospital scenes weren't just cinematic. She was balancing shooting with other commitments, and there were days when she'd sleep barely 3 hours before being called to set. One intense monologue took 14 takes, not because she couldn't nail it, but because she kept going deeper. Each take peeled away another layer. Director Cathy reportedly said, Kathryn was crying, but not acting. She was just breaking. Those were the takes they used. And it worked. The vulnerability bleeds through the screen. Meanwhile, Daniel Padilla, known more for his charisma than his emotional range at the time, had to dig into unfamiliar territory. His character Primo was messy, insecure, and at times, selfish, a far cry from the usual swoon-worthy heartthrobs he was used to playing. But Daniel wanted to push himself. For one pivotal argument scene, he isolated himself from Kathryn all day. No talking, no joking around. He even ate lunch alone. That simmering distance added a real tension to their dynamic. And when the cameras rolled, what came out wasn't rehearsed. It was reaction. Real anger. Real heartbreak. The crew watched in stunned silence. But let's talk about the house. Yes, the house. The one that feels like the film's third lead character. It wasn't built on a soundstage or borrowed for a weekend. It was transformed over the course of production. A real house in Quezon City was chosen for its structure. But every piece of aging, every cracked wall, was art-directed. There was a dedicated team whose job was to age the house in reverse as the story unfolded. Because remember, the film doesn't follow a linear timeline. Scenes jump between the past and present. So the crew had to shoot the later scenes first, where the house is in disrepair, and then slowly peel that back. Paint was stripped, then reapplied. Furniture was replaced, only to be swapped back again. Continuity was a nightmare. There was an entire wall of Polaroids taken to remember exact placements of objects. And the rain? That wasn't a lucky weather coincidence. It was manufactured. The emotional breakdown scene, where George walks out into the storm, required an entire rig system to simulate rain. But midway through filming, the water pressure failed. So there they were, camera ready, actor in tears, lighting perfect, and no rain. After a frustrating 2-hour delay, the solution was shockingly low-tech. Several crew members stood on ladders with hoses, manually spraying the scene. The result? A downpour that felt real, because it was born out of desperation and duct tape. There's also a scene where George breaks a plate. Seems simple, right? Except Kathryn really broke it. And not just 1, 7. The production had prepared a stack of breakaway plates, but the moment kept going off script. Kathryn would say her line, slam the plate, and Cathy would yell, again. On the 8th take, Kathryn finally snapped, not just in character. She muttered under her breath, "I'm gonna run out of plates." That unscripted line made it into the rough cut. Though eventually trimmed, it became a favorite blooper among the crew. And then there's the famous road trip montage, a moment of pure chemistry and joy. The twist? None of it was planned. The cast and crew were stuck in traffic on the way to a new location. Boredom hit. Daniel pulled out his phone and began filming Kathryn dancing in the car. The two were in character, goofing around, not realizing the camera van behind them had started recording too. Later, in the editing suite, Cathy saw the footage and declared, "This is it. This is love." The raw, unscripted playfulness became one of the most beloved sequences in the film. Behind the camera, things were equally intense. Cinematographer Noel T. Hankey had the challenge of balancing intimate emotion with visual metaphor. He opted for a handheld approach in most interior scenes, not to create shakiness, but to subtly mirror the instability of the characters. If you watch closely, the camera breathes with the actors. It sways when they're unsure, holds steady when they're united. During one scene, the camera crew literally stood in bathtubs and under tables to get the angles right. For one tracking shot of George walking through the house post-breakup, the camera operator had to walk backwards through 3 doorways, lit only by natural light, while staying in perfect focus. One wrong step, and they'd crash into the vintage piano the art team had spent hours positioning. The post-production process unveiled even more drama. The film's original cut was over 3 hours long. It included flashbacks to Primo's childhood, more time with George's brother, and an entire subplot about her nursing board exam stress. All cut. The final decision to streamline the film came from a test screening, where viewers loved the emotional moments but felt overwhelmed by plot volume. In the editing room, Cathy and her team had to make brutal decisions. "Kill your darlings," they said. Entire scenes that actors had poured their hearts into were left on the floor. But the payoff was pacing. The final version is tighter, more potent, and hits every emotional beat. One of the strangest discoveries happened after the film's release. Viewers began posting side-by-side comparisons of lines and moments that had eerie parallels to Cathy Garcia-Molina's earlier works. A line in The House of Us, "Bakit kapag career mo, dapat maintindihan kita, pero kapag ako, hindi mo ako maintindihan," echoes a similar line from A Very Special Love. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe, as fans began to their eyes, Cathy was weaving a cinematic universe. Characters across her films facing similar struggles, as if all love stories are part of one long, aching conversation. But not everything behind the scenes was poetic. During one location shoot in Batangas, the crew ran into a major logistical problem: wild dogs. Filming had to pause repeatedly because a group of strays kept barking during takes. One particularly persistent dog, dubbed Ascalito by the crew, even made it into a background shot. Rather than reshoot, they kept it. Look closely at the scene where Primo sits alone on the porch. Ascalito trots by in the back, tail wagging, oblivious to the emotional wreckage playing out in front of him. Controversy also touched the film, albeit lightly. Some viewers took issue with the film's depiction of George sacrificing so much of herself for Primo's potential. Critics argued that it glorified emotional labor and enabled toxic dependency. But the filmmakers responded by saying that was the point. The House of Us doesn't romanticize suffering, it exposes it. George's arc isn't about staying, it's about reclaiming. And Primo's growth doesn't come from her forgiveness. It comes from his realization that love without accountability is hollow. Another unusual moment? The final kiss scene. It took 6 takes. Not because the actors were hesitant, they've worked together for years, but because it kept raining. Not in the script. Not part of the set. Just actual, unplanned rain that started pouring every time they set up the camera. When they finally got a clear sky, Kathryn looked up and laughed. Maybe the universe just wanted us to wait. Even the marketing campaign had its quirks. The teaser poster, a close-up of George and Primo in mid-laugh, wasn't a promo shot. It was taken during a lighting test. The laughter wasn't part of a scene. It was real, captured when Daniel made a bad joke about set food. But the photographer snapped it, sent it to the production team, and it became the defining image of the film. That accidental moment became the emotional shorthand for everything the House of Us promised. Intimacy, joy, imperfection. Behind the scenes, the crew formed their own little ecosystem. Inside, jokes flourished. The boom mic operator kept a tally of how many times Kathryn said "serioso ka" on set. Daniel played prankster, replacing coffee with soy sauce on set one morning. And Cathy Garcia-Molina had a ritual. She'd write handwritten letters to the main cast after emotionally heavy scenes. A quiet thank you. A way of saying, I see what you're carrying. And perhaps the strangest fact of all? There's no official alternate ending. But there is an unscripted final shot that no one talks about. After filming wrapped, Kathryn and Daniel stayed on set for a while, sitting on the house's steps in costume. The crew didn't stop rolling. They sat in silence. No lines. No direction. Just being. That footage was never used. But if you ask the editor, it's his favorite moment. That's the real ending, he said. Not what's in theaters. Just 2 people, quiet, exhausted, still together. And maybe that's what makes The House of Us so powerful. Not the drama, the romance, or the tears. But the fact that behind every scene, real people were pouring themselves into something messy and complicated and achingly human. Just like the story they were telling. Because love isn't just found in the script. Sometimes, it's in the rain hoses, the forgotten plate shards, the dog who wouldn't leave, the joke that becomes a poster, the silence that says more than any line. It's in the house. Always. There's a moment in The House of Us that doesn't need grand music or even dialogue to strike deep. Primo is sitting by himself in the house they built together, surrounded by his own silence. It's not loud grief. It's quiet devastation. And that's what makes it powerful. Cinematically, it's a slow burn. Daniel Padilla barely moves. The frame is static, and the air feels thick with regret. Critics often point to this as the film's tonal shift. The first half may have dazzled with sweetness and spark, but this is the point where we realize the story is about love not just lived, but lost. It's a lesson on how absence speaks louder than presence. Another unforgettable scene, and arguably the emotional heart of the movie, is the confrontation between George and Primo in the middle of the rain. The symbolism is layered, the storm reflecting the chaos within, the downpour acting almost like a baptism of truth. George finally says what she's been holding back for years, her voice breaking, her hands trembling. Hindi AKO Messiah, Primo. It's not a scream. It's a whisper that hits like a scream. What makes this scene so visceral isn't just the writing. It's Kathryn Bernardo's restrained yet blistering delivery. The pain isn't just in the tears. It's in the way she stops herself from falling apart until she can't anymore. This scene resonated with audiences because it mirrored a universal truth. The moment you admit that love isn't enough anymore. What critics admired about this particular moment was how it refused to fall into melodrama. Director Cathy Garcia-Molina allowed the silence between lines to carry just as much weight as the words themselves. The rain was real, the fatigue was real, and the performances bled authenticity. It didn't feel staged. It felt like we were intruding on something deeply personal. Film scholars later pointed to this sequence as a masterclass in cinematic intimacy. How the camera can feel like both a participant and a voyeur, capturing emotional exposure without exploitation. Then there's the house itself, arguably one of the film's most metaphorical and consistent elements. More than a setting, it became a visual representation of the relationship. In the beginning, it's vibrant, chaotic, full of dreams, mismatched mugs, loud music, and toothbrushes in one cup. Then slowly, things chip away. The clutter turns into neglect. The plants die. The light fades. Every corner begins to resemble what's broken between George and Primo. Critics and fans alike have interpreted the deterioration of the house as a form of silent storytelling. It's the narrative without words, showing us that sometimes, love erodes not from impact, but from wear. This layered visual design became a subject of analysis in academic discussions around the film, with the house often cited as a physical barometer of the couple's emotional state. A moment often brought up in fan discussions is the argument at the dinner table, where George tries to keep things composed but Primo casually dismisses her concerns. It's not a big, dramatic fight, but a tiny slice of emotional disconnection. He speaks, she listens, and somewhere in between, something breaks. What makes this scene so devastating is how ordinary it feels. It's not the climax of a fight, it's the quiet middle, the way people talk past each other without even realizing it. For many viewers, this was the moment the film stopped being just a story and started reflecting their own lives back at them. And that's what makes it powerful. It forces introspection. Another essential piece is Primo's failed performance, the gig that he thought would change everything. It's subtle, almost understated, but it carries immense narrative weight. Here's a man who has built his entire sense of worth on talent, and in that moment, everything crumbles. He forgets lyrics, fumbles chords, and loses the crowd. But what hurts more is the look on George's face. Disappointment not in his failure, but in his delusion. This moment, often praised by critics, reveals the film's thematic core. The danger of potential without action, of passion without discipline. Primo isn't just failing on stage, he's failing as a partner, and it's being broadcast for everyone to see. The fact that this moment is followed by silence rather than confrontation makes it even heavier. One scene that stirred an emotional storm on social media was George's quiet breakdown in the bathroom. There's no one to talk to, no one to perform for. Just her and the mirror. She stares, wipes her tears, breathes heavily, and tries to put on a brave face. The lighting is dim, her face bare. It's a moment so raw it feels intrusive. Kathryn Bernardo's performance here is considered one of the finest in her career, not because of how much she does, but how much she doesn't. This is the aftermath of emotional endurance. The body is still, but the eyes betray exhaustion. What makes this moment special is how it reflects a type of strength rarely portrayed in mainstream romance. The strength to hold back, to endure, to keep choosing yourself when it's easier to give in. Another high-impact sequence is the short montage of what life used to be. The laughter, the music, the dancing in the living room, the spontaneous road trips. These flashbacks, dropped sporadically throughout the film, function like emotional landmines. They remind us of what was lost, not dramatically, but in bits. Each fragment builds a contrast to the present. The storytelling technique here is clever. Instead of long expositional scenes, the film uses memory as emotional punctuation. It trusts the audience to feel the weight of contrast. Critics applauded this restraint, noting how the film doesn't over-explain grief. It simply shows us joy, then takes it away. One of the more underrated yet vital moments is Primo's decision to stay away, even when George begins to succeed. It's a reversal of roles. Finally, she's rising, and he's watching from a distance. The choice not to insert himself back into her life immediately speaks volumes. It's growth, maturity, but also an admission of failure. He realizes that healing her means letting her be, not running back when she shines. This moment didn't get a lot of screen time, but thematically, it's monumental. It's the shift from possession to respect, from love as dependence to love as release. Critics highlighted this as one of the most progressive ideas in the film, that sometimes, loving someone means stepping back, not forward. The reunion at the end, quiet and without fireworks, is another standout. There's no dramatic chase, no airport scene, no declarations. Just two people, weathered by time, meeting again, not to rekindle what was, but to acknowledge what still lingers. There's a maturity in how the film handles this moment. It doesn't promise forever. It doesn't even promise tomorrow. It offers a question. Can we try again? And that question, filled with vulnerability and risk, is more powerful than any promise. In terms of cinematic technique, the way The House of Us uses space and distance is worth dissecting. In early scenes, George and Primo are often shot close together. Tight frames, overlapping movements. As their relationship deteriorates, the camera subtly pulls back. Wide shots dominate. Empty space surrounds them. They sit on opposite sides of rooms, speak across doorways. This visual storytelling subtly reinforces their emotional disconnection. Critics have pointed out how this approach, rooted in minimalist cinematography, creates an almost subconscious discomfort in viewers. We feel the distance before we understand it. And yet, through all these moments, one theme rises again and again: the burden of expectation. From George's dream of stability to Primo's belief in artistic greatness, the film repeatedly circles around the gap between what we hope for and what we live. Every critical scene hinges on that dissonance. The missed gigs, the forgotten anniversaries, the rejected apologies, all stem from characters projecting futures they weren't prepared to fight for. It's not about betrayal in the usual sense. It's about incompatibility revealed over time. And that's what makes the film so deeply human. Audience reactions reflected this emotional resonance. Many viewers posted online about how the film mirrored their own breakups, their own unfinished conversations. Some even described watching it as a form of catharsis, a way of grieving relationships that had no clear ending. The rain scene became meme-worthy, but not in a mocking way, in a reverent, affectionate way. It became shorthand for every emotionally charged moment where we finally say what we've been burying. But perhaps the most crucial aspect of these key moments is their refusal to simplify. There are no clear heroes or villains. No singular big mistake that undoes the love. It's 1,000 small failures, missed signals, and misaligned hopes. And by refusing to offer easy answers, The House of Us does something rare. It lets the audience sit in discomfort. It doesn't hand you closure. It hands you the reality that some love stories are shaped more by the ending than the beginning. In the end, what makes these scenes and their emotional gravity unforgettable is how they echo long after the credits roll. They linger not because they were dramatic, but because they were true. Every raised voice, every aching silence, every shared glance across a room, they become mirrors. Reflections not just of the characters, but of us. Because the real power of The House of Us isn't just in the house of their love story. It's in the house of our own. The beauty of The House of Us isn't just in its aching story or magnetic performances. It's in how all of it was made to feel so heartbreakingly real. And that feeling didn't happen by accident. Behind every soft-spoken line, every shot drenched in rain, every painfully relatable silence, there was a team working tirelessly to craft something that didn't just entertain, but moved. It's easy to forget that what feels so effortless on screen was actually the result of months of precise creative planning, and even more emotional labor off-screen. And when you start peeling back the layers of its production, the love and intention behind every frame become even more apparent. It all began with a shared dream, one between director Cathy Garcia-Molina, Kathryn Bernardo, and Daniel Padilla, who had already built a legacy as one of the Philippines' most beloved on-screen pairs. But with The House of Us, they weren't out to repeat their past formula. They were aiming for something deeper. This wasn't going to be the typical romantic comedy that tidily wraps everything in a bow. They wanted to go further. To strip back the glamour. To tell the story of what happens after the happy ending. That direction alone set a new standard, not just for the love team, but for the entire romantic drama genre in the local film industry. From the start, Cathy Garcia-Molina had one mission: authenticity. She pushed her cast and crew to create a world that felt lived in. The house where George and Primo build their life together? It wasn't just a set. It was an actual house the team redesigned from the inside out. Art direction was tasked with aging it naturally across the timeline of the film. Walls became scuffed, furniture shifted, lights dimmed, and little details, like faded post-it notes or mismatched kitchenware, slowly crept in. Every item had a purpose. Nothing felt placed. It felt like a home, and then, a memory. One of the production's most ambitious moves was shooting the film largely in chronological order, something rarely done in modern filmmaking. Most productions shoot out of sequence to save time and money, but Garcia-Molina insisted on preserving the emotional continuity of the characters. That decision proved to be a logistical nightmare at times, especially with weather shifts and scheduling conflicts. But it paid off. Because when you see Primo slowly lose his spark, or George shift from hope to exhaustion, it's not acting in the traditional sense, it's accumulated emotion. Kathryn and Daniel weren't just playing those changes. They were living them, day by day. And that kind of emotional rawness wouldn't have landed without the delicate way the film was shot. Cinematographer Noel T. Hankey opted for a naturalistic approach, favoring soft lighting, handheld shots, and lingering takes. Instead of flashy camera movements or over-polished lighting setups, the film leans into realism. Scenes are often lit like the real world, morning sun filtering through curtains, or a fluorescent kitchen light buzzing quietly above a tense dinner. The camera stays close but not intrusive, letting the actors breathe. There's a tenderness to how everything is framed, even in scenes of conflict. That choice was intentional. The goal wasn't to impress the audience, it was to invite them in. Lighting, in particular, was treated as an emotional tool. As the story darkens, so does the palette. Warm golden hues in the early days give way to colder, more sterile tones. The house begins to feel emptier, not just through the set design, but through the way light falls across its rooms. During George's breakdown, for instance, she isn't lit like a movie star. She's lit like a woman alone with her pain. It's raw. And that decision, from a cinematographic standpoint, is incredibly bold in an industry that often prioritizes gloss over grit. But one of the film's quietest innovations was its use of sound. In many mainstream romantic dramas, music is used like punctuation. Cue the sad piano for heartbreak, the soaring strings for reconciliation. But The House of Us used music sparingly. Often, silence was the score, or the subtle creak of a floorboard, or the ambient sound of rain tapping on a tin roof. Sound designer Mikko Quizzen leaned into what he called emotional atmosphere. When Primo and George fought, you could hear the distance between them, not just in their voices, but in the quiet between their words. When George cried in the bathroom, the echo of her sobs bouncing off tiles made the space feel suffocating. Even in the recording mix, these choices were preserved with restraint. Nothing felt overproduced. It felt human. One fascinating detail often overlooked is how the script evolved during filming. Cathy Garcia-Molina is known for encouraging her actors to rewrite their lines in real time, to speak the way their characters would, not the way a script demands. That's why many of the film's most gut-wrenching lines weren't even in the original script. Kathryn Bernardo improvised several of her breakdowns. Daniel Padilla rephrased monologues to match Primo's rhythm. This kind of creative freedom is rare, especially on big studio films. But it's what gave the movie its soul. It wasn't recitation, it was confession. And it wasn't always easy. Filming took a toll on the actors emotionally and physically. One particular rain scene, arguably the most iconic in the film, required hours of exposure to freezing temperatures, multiple takes, and an intensely emotional build-up. Kathryn reportedly stayed in character long after the cameras stopped rolling, shaking, crying, not because of the cold, but because of how deep the scene cut. Production had to pause, not just for technical resets, but to give her space. That scene, when finished, lasted less than 5 minutes on screen. But it was shot over nearly a full day. The result? A moment that still gives audiences goosebumps years later. Then there was the challenge of working with time itself. The film spans several years, but rather than rely heavily on title cards or overt time jumps, the creative team used subtle aging to tell the story. Kathryn's character subtly shifts her wardrobe, her posture, even her voice. Primo's style slowly unravels. Even their skin tone changes slightly. Makeup artists worked to fade the freshness from their faces, replacing it with the wear of time. It's not loud. It's quiet. but you feel it. The editing process, led by Moria Ignacio, was another masterclass in restraint. Instead of cutting quickly between angles, many scenes hold for just a few seconds longer than expected, forcing the audience to sit in the discomfort. Conversations don't end with dramatic music stings. They often end with awkward silence, trailing glances, or characters walking away mid-sentence. The pacing isn't rushed, nor is it slow, it's deliberate. It mirrors the rhythm of real arguments, real regrets. Critics praised the film's editing for respecting the audience's intelligence. It trusts us to feel, not just follow. What's also incredible is how the movie managed to walk the fine line between local cultural nuance and universal relatability. The script is laced with Filipino values, family pressure, long-term commitment, self-sacrifice, but it never feels didactic. George and Primo's story may be uniquely Filipino, but their heartbreak is global. Their arguments? Timeless. Their silences? Familiar. That delicate balancing act was a direct result of the collaborative writing process between Cathy Garcia-Molina and screenwriter Carmi Raimundo, who worked closely to ensure the story didn't fall into cliché. Instead, they allowed contradiction, messiness, and moral ambiguity. No character was wholly right or wrong. And that honesty, though difficult, made it unforgettable. Even in promotion, the film broke new ground. Instead of the usual press junkets and romantic marketing, the team leaned into realism. Promotional clips focused on the challenges of maintaining a relationship, not just the sweetness of starting one. Interviews centered around themes of growth and letting go. It was a risk, but audiences responded because it didn't sell a fantasy. It presented the truth, and that truth extended to the very last scene of the film. Originally, it was meant to be more conclusive, a reunion framed in bright light, full of hope. But after multiple test screenings, the team decided to reshoot. What they landed on was far more mature, a quiet conversation. A question. A maybe. No swelling music, no kissing in the rain. Just two people, trying again. It was subtle. It was perfect. And it was a reflection of the production's core philosophy: trust the quiet. Looking back, The House of Us may not have reinvented cinema. But what it did do was reinvent expectation. It proved that local romantic dramas didn't need to rely on gimmicks, archetypes, or fantasy. It showed that the most powerful love stories are the ones that dare to look like our stories. The ones that tremble in silence, falter in doubt, and still, somehow, find hope in the mess. Behind every scene, there was innovation, not just in technology or technique, but in bravery. The bravery to stay still when others would cut. To whisper when others would shout. To show the cracks, not just the sparkle. And in doing so, The House of Us didn't just tell a story. It built one. From the opening frames of The House of Us, it becomes clear that this is not just another love story. At first glance, it might seem like a simple tale of two people struggling to make a relationship work. But as the layers of the film unfold, it becomes apparent that the narrative is so much more. A nuanced exploration of love, personal sacrifice, identity, and the struggle to reconcile dreams with reality. This is a film that doesn't just examine a relationship, it examines the complex, often painful choices that come with commitment and the emotional weight of expectations. She can continue to give of herself to someone who isn't willing to meet her halfway. At a time when women are encouraged to be independent, self-sufficient, and pursue their own goals, George's decision becomes a symbol of modern-day liberation. Her ability to walk away, to choose herself, speaks to a broader societal shift where personal fulfillment is no longer synonymous with holding on to a relationship at any cost. This sense of liberation ties in with the film's underlying message. Relationships are not always about surviving through the storms but about knowing when to let go. And sometimes, letting go is not an act of failure, it is an act of growth. The ultimate act of self-love is not in trying to salvage a relationship that no longer serves you, but in having the courage to break free and trust that you can build something new, even if it's just for yourself. The symbolism of change runs throughout the movie. Primo and George don't just change in the obvious ways. Their wardrobe, their homes, their routines. They change on a deeper level. The small details, the haircuts, the changing patterns in their conversations, mirror their internal transformations. Even the seemingly small acts, like George choosing to stop cooking for Primo or Primo allowing himself to finally say what he feels, speak volumes about their evolving self-awareness. In the end, The House of Us transcends the traditional love story. It is not just a reflection of the highs and lows of romantic love, but a poignant commentary on what it means to love, not just others, but yourself. It's about understanding the delicate balance between supporting another person and maintaining your own identity, the painful but necessary realization that love can sometimes require letting go rather than holding on. The film doesn't give easy answers or offer a neatly packaged ending. Instead, it asks us to confront the complexity of love and identity, to question our expectations, and to reflect on the sacrifices we make along the way. In doing so, it becomes a mirror for society, forcing us to reconsider the roles we play in our own relationships and the costs those roles can impose. Through all its layers, symbolic, emotional, and cultural, The House of Us remains an intensely personal and yet universal journey. One that, like love itself, refuses to be simplified or easily understood. In The House of Us, every frame serves a purpose. From the way a scene is lit to the way sound subtly shifts the tone, the visual and auditory elements are intricately woven together to enhance the emotional journey of the characters. The director's vision is not only told through the dialogue but through a rich tapestry of cinematic techniques that elevate the story, making it feel alive and immersive. It's through these techniques that the audience is invited to experience the raw, unfiltered moments of George and Primo's relationship, drawing us deeper into the emotional intensity of their world. The visual style of The House of Us is one of the most striking elements of the film, shaped with deliberate intent to capture the internal struggles of the characters. From the opening moments, the use of lighting becomes a key visual tool. In the early scenes, there's a sense of warmth, golden hues, soft lighting, that reflect the idealized version of love that George and Primo share. These visuals align with the hopeful energy of their relationship. Yet, as their struggles deepen, the cinematography shifts. The lighting grows cooler, more muted. Shadows creep into their scenes, making the frame feel more confining. This visual evolution mirrors the changes in their relationship, highlighting the emotional distance that begins to grow between them. One of the most notable stylistic choices the film employs is its use of tight framing during moments of emotional intensity. When George and Primo confront their relationship issues, the camera often closes in on their faces, capturing the raw emotions flickering across their expressions. It's as though the film is forcing the audience to be part of these intimate exchanges. By isolating the characters in these tightly framed shots, we are made to feel their emotional suffocation, their sense of being trapped not just in the relationship, but in their own personal turmoil. This technique not only reflects their psychological states but also invites the viewer to connect with the characters on a deeply personal level. In contrast, the film opens with wider shots, scenes in open spaces, moments of freedom. The expansiveness of these frames speaks to the optimism of early love. The sun shines brighter, the sky feels open, and the world is full of possibility. But as the emotional tension builds, these open spaces begin to close in, mirroring the narrowing of their futures together. The shift from expansive to constrictive cinematography serves as a visual cue for the evolution of their relationship, showing how their once boundless hopes have now become limited by reality. The use of color also plays a significant role in visual storytelling. Early in the film, the color palette is warm and vibrant. Rich reds, soft yellows, and soothing blues reflect the emotional warmth between George and Primo. However, as the couple's dynamic shifts, the color palette becomes more subdued, dominated by colder tones of grays and muted greens. These muted colors symbolize the fading hope in their relationship. The contrast between the warm and cold tones visually illustrates the emotional dissonance that begins to define their interactions. The changing color scheme is a visual metaphor for the characters' internal conflict. The once passionate love now feels distant and detached. In one particular scene, the filmmakers use reflections in mirrors and windows as a symbolic tool. These reflections aren't just visual flourishes. They represent the characters' fractured identities. The mirror scenes, especially those that show George looking at herself, highlight her internal struggle. The reflection in the glass is often distorted, just as her view of herself and her place in the relationship is becoming warped. It's a clever use of reflection not only to signify the character's internal conflict but also to hint at the duality of their lives, the person they are and the person they feel they have to be for the sake of love. The film's sound design is just as essential to its emotional weight as its visual style. The use of silence in key moments is just as potent as the sound. When George and Primo have their most intense confrontations, there's often a deep stillness that fills the space, a haunting silence that underscores the emotional distance between them. The absence of sound emphasizes the gap in their communication, the inability to bridge the chasm of their misunderstandings. It's an intentional choice, showing that sometimes words fall short when the emotional connection has already begun to break down. In those moments, the silence speaks volumes, louder than any dialogue could. Yet, when the film does use sound, it does so in a way that adds to the emotional intensity. The soundtrack of The House of Us plays a crucial role in guiding the audience through the character's journey. The score is subtle yet powerful, shifting between melancholy piano motifs and soaring strings that reflect the ups and downs of their relationship. The music often swells during the more emotional scenes, heightening the intensity of the moment and adding depth to the character's feelings. There's a particular piece of music that recurs throughout the film, slow, melancholic, with a sense of longing, that serves as an auditory symbol of the emotional weight George and Primo carry. Every time it plays, it underscores the moments when they are closest to breaking, reminding us of the tension they're experiencing. The song choices are also integral to the story, and the music is not just a backdrop but a reflection of the film's themes. At times, the songs feel like a soundtrack to the characters' inner monologues, subtly enhancing the meaning behind their decisions. One of the most powerful moments in the film is when a song George once played for Primo becomes a motif of sadness and resignation. What was once a symbol of their shared love now becomes a painful reminder of what has been lost. This musical shift mirrors the transformation of their relationship, from hopeful to disillusioned, and reflects the passage of time and emotional change. The film's editing further complements its visual and auditory elements. There is a rhythmic flow to the editing, sometimes quick, sometimes slow, reflecting the pacing of the couple's emotional highs and lows. When they're happy, when their connection feels real, the shots are often quicker, more fluid, symbolizing the easy flow of their early love. But as the cracks begin to show, the editing slows, with lingering shots that force the audience to sit with the tension and discomfort. It's a clever technique that builds a sense of unease, making us feel the weight of every silent, unspoken word. One of the most brilliant editing choices comes in the way the film handles transitions between scenes. In moments of emotional turmoil, the transitions are often jarring, cutting sharply between locations or actions, much like the way George and Primo's lives are fragmented. The abrupt changes mirror the disjointed nature of their relationship, where their emotional states are unpredictable, and they're often unable to follow a steady path forward. Conversely, the moments of hope are marked by more fluid transitions, smooth dissolves between scenes that evoke a sense of continuity, reflecting the optimism of their earlier days. The contrast between these two styles of editing helps emphasize the emotional turbulence the characters endure as they navigate the complexity of love. The director's vision for The House of Us is not just about telling a love story, it's about crafting an immersive emotional experience. Every decision, from the visual style to the sound design, works in harmony to create an atmosphere that feels almost tangible. The choice of camera angles, the way the light falls on a character's face, the carefully selected pieces of music, all of these elements come together to enhance the narrative. The director invites the audience into the emotional world of the characters, allowing us to feel their joys, their heartache, and their struggles as though we are experiencing them ourselves. The cinematography isn't just about capturing beautiful images, it's about capturing the emotional essence of the story. The director understands that love isn't just a feeling, it's a lived experience, one that takes place in moments both big and small. The subtle shifts in lighting, the careful framing of shots, and the manipulation of sound all contribute to a heightened sense of intimacy, drawing the viewer into George and Primo's world in ways that words alone cannot express. This is the art of visual storytelling, where the images, sounds, and pacing combine to create something far more powerful than the sum of their parts. In conclusion, The House of Us is a masterclass in visual storytelling and sound design. The film's cinematic techniques serve not just as decoration but as an integral part of the narrative itself. From the lighting and color choices to the editing and music, each element works in harmony to bring the characters' emotions to the forefront, making their journey feel visceral and real. The director's vision is evident in every frame, and it is through these technical choices that the film transcends the typical romantic drama. It becomes an immersive experience, one that stays with you long after the credits roll, inviting you to reflect on love, loss, and everything that lies in between. As The House of Us draws its emotional curtain to a close, one can't help but feel that its significance extends beyond the confines of the screen. What began as a deeply personal story about two people grappling with love, identity, and sacrifice has evolved into a cultural touchstone. Not only did it leave a lasting imprint on the hearts of its audiences, but it also influenced the broader landscape of filmmaking and pop culture in ways that continue to resonate today. This film stands as a testament to how storytelling, when done with emotional depth and authenticity, can transcend the screen to affect the way we perceive love, relationships, and even our cultural narratives. Released on August 29, 2018, The House of Us was more than just a box office success. It marked a pivotal moment in Filipino cinema and the romantic drama genre. Directed by Cathy Garcia-Molina, known for her exceptional ability to balance romance with humor and emotional depth, the film took on the bold challenge of exploring complex and often painful aspects of love. At the heart of it was not just the chemistry between the leads, but the deep emotional truths about relationships and the sacrifices they often demand. The film's resonance with its audiences was immediate, and its success wasn't merely commercial. It tapped into something much deeper, a shared experience of navigating the intricacies of love, identity, and compromise. In the context of romantic drama, The House of Us broke new ground by moving away from the usual idealized love stories that often dominate the genre. Instead of presenting a fairy-tale romance where all obstacles are eventually overcome with a happily ever after, it presented a raw and relatable portrayal of the complexities that often define adult relationships. The film's willingness to show the emotional struggles, the doubts, and the painful growth that comes with love set it apart from its predecessors. It moved away from fantasy and grounded itself in reality, where love is messy, flawed, and often uncertain. In doing so, it expanded the scope of what a romantic film could represent, inspiring future filmmakers to approach love stories with greater nuance and emotional honesty. Beyond the realm of film, The House of Us made a significant cultural impact. It spoke to audiences in a way few films do, by reflecting their own lives and relationships. The film's themes of sacrifice, ambition, self-discovery, and the question of when to let go resonated deeply with viewers from all walks of life, particularly young people navigating their own relationships and coming to terms with the balance between personal dreams and romantic commitments. Its portrayal of a strong, independent female character like George, who learns to prioritize her own growth and well-being, also resonated with audiences in a cultural moment where empowerment and self-worth have become central to contemporary conversations. The cultural relevance of the film was further solidified by its depiction of Filipino values, yet in a way that felt universal. While it undoubtedly struck a chord with Filipino audiences due to its cultural context and specific references, the film's exploration of universal themes of love and personal growth ensured that it transcended national boundaries. It resonated not just in the Philippines, but with viewers across Southeast Asia and beyond, solidifying its place as a significant piece of popular culture. The film's impact didn't end with its success at the box office. The House of Us quickly became a conversation starter, a cultural milestone that sparked debates, discussions, and even social media trends. Hashtags related to the film became viral, with fans sharing their own interpretations of the characters' struggles and relating it to their personal lives. The central relationship between George and Primo became a symbol of the complex dynamics of modern love, a reminder that not all relationships are meant to last forever, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to walk away. Awards and recognition followed soon after the film's release, cementing its place in the annals of cinematic history. It garnered numerous nominations and wins at prestigious award shows, including the Filipino Academy of Movie Arts and Sciences, Farmers Awards and the PMPC Star Awards for movies. Its success wasn't just limited to accolades. It also led to discussions about the evolving landscape of Filipino cinema. The film became a case study in how the romantic drama genre could evolve, exploring themes of emotional vulnerability, personal growth, and the complexities of human relationships. It set a new standard for how films in this genre could balance emotional depth with compelling narratives. One of the most enduring aspects of The House of Us is its impact on the careers of its stars. Kathryn Bernardo, who portrayed George, and Daniel Padilla, who played Primo, saw their already successful careers reach new heights following the film's release. The film solidified their status as one of the most beloved on-screen pairs in Filipino cinema, with their chemistry continuing to captivate audiences long after the film's premiere. For both actors, The House of Us marked a major turning point, showcasing their range as performers and elevating their status in the industry. But the film's legacy is not just about its influence on the romantic drama genre or its cultural impact. It's about the way it continues to be relevant, even years after its release. The film remains a fixture in discussions about modern love, and its themes of self-discovery, the importance of communication, and the necessity of personal growth continue to resonate with new generations of viewers. In a world that is constantly evolving, where relationships and social dynamics are in a constant state of flux, The House of Us stands as a reminder that the journey toward understanding love and ourselves is never truly finished. The lasting significance of the film lies in its ability to spark deep, personal reflection. It challenges its viewers to confront the realities of their own relationships, asking difficult questions about love, sacrifice, and personal fulfillment. The film's portrayal of characters who, despite their love for each other, must face the hard truth that not all relationships are meant to be, is both heartbreaking and empowering. It teaches us that sometimes, love is not about holding on but knowing when to let go for the sake of our own well-being. Furthermore, The House of Us remains a cultural touchstone because of its universality. The themes explored in the film, personal growth, the need for self-love, the complexities of adult relationships, are not confined to one culture or one generation. The film continues to speak to audiences worldwide because it addresses the timeless truths about love and the emotional journey that comes with it. Whether you are in the Philippines, the United States, or anywhere in between, the film's exploration of what it means to love and be loved remains profoundly relatable. In many ways, The House of Us marks a shift in how we view romantic relationships in cinema. It's no longer just about a couple overcoming external obstacles or proving their love through grand gestures. Instead, it's about confronting the internal battles, the insecurities, the self-doubt, the sacrifices that often accompany real love. In doing so, it elevates the genre, transforming it from simple escapism to a powerful tool for introspection and growth. It invites the audience not just to watch a story unfold but to reflect on their own journeys in love and self-discovery. Ultimately, The House of Us will remain significant not because of its box office earnings, not because of its awards, but because of its profound emotional resonance. The film remains a conversation starter, a cultural marker that continues to inspire, provoke thought, and leave a lasting emotional impact. It will continue to be remembered as a cinematic achievement that captured the essence of love, beautiful, messy, painful, and ultimately transformative. Its legacy is a reminder that love, in all its forms, is worth exploring, because it shapes who we are, who we become, and how we relate to the world around us. As we draw the curtain on this deep dive into The House of Us, it's clear that this film is so much more than just a romantic drama. It's an exploration of the complexities of love, sacrifice, and personal growth, wrapped in a visually stunning and emotionally rich cinematic experience. From its unforgettable performances to its masterful cinematography, sound design, and thematic depth, The House of Us has proven to be a film that resonates deeply with audiences long after the credits roll. At the heart of the film is its deeply human portrayal of a couple grappling with the realities of their relationship. George and Primo, played to perfection by Kathryn Bernardo and Daniel Padilla, bring a rawness to their characters that makes their struggles relatable and powerful. Their journey isn't about grand gestures or overcoming external villains, but rather about the quiet, often painful internal struggles that shape who we are in love, in life, and in relationships. This focus on emotional authenticity sets The House of Us apart from typical love stories, transforming it from a simple romance into a profound exploration of human connection and self-discovery. The film's visual style, guided by the expert hand of director Cathy Garcia-Molina, plays a key role in immersing the audience in the characters' emotional worlds. From the warmth of the early scenes to the colder, more confining tones that accompany the couple's unraveling relationship, every frame serves a purpose. The cinematography doesn't just capture the beauty of the characters and their surroundings. It conveys the shifting emotional landscape of their relationship, making us feel what they feel. It's a masterclass in visual storytelling, where every shot, every angle, is carefully constructed to enhance the emotional depth of the narrative. But The House of Us doesn't just rely on visuals to tell its story. The film's sound design is a crucial component in building the emotional tension, using silence and subtle sound cues to convey the unsaid, the moments of doubt and pain that linger in the spaces between the characters' words. The music, too, is an integral part of the film, with its melodies and motifs amplifying the highs and lows of George and Primo's journey. It's the kind of soundtrack that lingers in your mind long after the film ends, underscoring the moments that matter most. And yet, it's the themes of the film that truly elevate it to something timeless. The House of Us doesn't just tell a story about a couple. It explores universal themes of personal growth, self-worth, and the delicate balance between love and independence. It challenges us to examine our own relationships, to ask the difficult questions about what it means to love someone, and whether we are willing to sacrifice our own happiness for the sake of a relationship. The film's portrayal of George's journey towards self-discovery and independence is empowering, particularly for audiences who can relate to the pressure of balancing personal ambitions with the expectations of those around us. The film's cultural impact cannot be overstated. The House of Us sparked conversations, debates, and reflections across a wide audience, touching on issues that are relevant not just in the context of Filipino culture but in the broader human experience. It broke new ground in its portrayal of love as something that is imperfect, messy, and sometimes painful, challenging the idealized version of romance that often dominates the screen. It showed that love isn't just about passion. It's about growth, compromise, and the willingness to let go when something no longer serves us. In doing so, it offered a refreshing new perspective on the genre and opened the door for more nuanced, emotionally complex love stories to come to the forefront. Beyond its cultural and emotional impact, The House of Us has also made an indelible mark on the world of filmmaking. The film's innovative use of cinematography, sound design, and editing has set a new standard for how romantic dramas can be told. It showed that romance doesn't have to be formulaic or predictable to be powerful. By focusing on the internal dynamics of the relationship and capturing the raw emotions of its characters, the film has become a reference point for future filmmakers who seek to explore the complexities of love with the same depth and honesty. The legacy of The House of Us extends beyond its immediate box office success. It continues to be a source of inspiration, not just for filmmakers but for audiences who find themselves reflected in the struggles of George and Primo. The film's enduring relevance is a testament to the power of storytelling that speaks to universal truths about love, identity, and the human condition. It remains a powerful reminder that, no matter how much we may try to control the course of our relationships, life has a way of throwing us curveballs that challenge us to grow, to learn, and to evolve. Ultimately, The House of Us stands as a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of self-discovery, and the recognition that sometimes, the most loving thing we can do for someone else is to let them go. It's a film that lingers in your thoughts long after you've seen it, prompting you to reflect on your own relationships, your own choices, and the path you've chosen in love and life. The film's honesty, its vulnerability, and its courage in tackling difficult emotional terrain make it a standout in the world of romantic dramas. If you loved this breakdown, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of cinema. Let's keep exploring movies together. The magic of film is boundless, and there's always more to uncover, more to understand, and more stories to experience. Until next time, keep watching, keep reflecting, and most importantly, keep feeling the stories that touch your heart.